My name is Billy Winn, and this is my house behind us. And I was born right up there in that window you see out there. And I grew up looking out over the Indian lands out there. I used to see the Indians and smoke signals and things coming. And that's what made me what I am today.
Can you take us inside?
Yes, but Mother's a little weird. Has to do with dogs. I don't want to explain it if I don't have to.
We're rolling.
This house behind me is the old McElhaney home, built in the 1850s and 60s. It was for many years in Columbus a school, so-called, for dinner toters, the little children who carried baskets and buckets of food to the workers in the mill. Until World War I, children in the mills in Columbus could work as young as 12 years of age, and actually younger than that if they were orphans or if they had no other means of support or if their mothers or fathers were dependent. So we had 6- and 7- and 8-year-old children working in the cotton mills here. 66-hour weeks, by the way, were minimum. After World War I, we had some legislation which raised the legal age to be employed in our cotton mills to 14 years of age. But still there were exemptions possible if you were a hardship case. Dinner toters were required to go to school 12 weeks a year. And this school, which was both for boys and girls, was in operation throughout the first half of the 20th century. Children would come here in the morning and leave usually at around 11 o'clock to go get their pails of food or baskets of food and walk the mile or 2 miles either up to Little Swift or downtown to Muskogee and Eagle and Phoenix. Some children would make 2 trips and 3 trips a day. They got paid, a quarter a week or 50 cents a week for doing this, depending on how many adults they served. It would take about an hour for a child to walk from here to the mill and home to get food and to the mill and back. So if you had 2 or 3 adults you were required to feed, it could take 3 hours or 4 hours a day to do it. Therefore, the educational opportunities for the children was minimal. They were taught here basic reading and writing. There were some rules about child labor that required the child to be at least able to sign his or her name before they could be employed in the mills beyond a certain age. And so some effort was made to teach them at least minimal skills in reading and writing. From this portico up here, you can look out over the Chattahoochee River to the Indian lands and to Ingersoll Hill. Ingersoll Hill was where the Ku Klux Klan used to meet when I was a boy, and where they would burn crosses from time to time. The Ku Klux Klan would also, which was very active in the mill and in the police department, would also take mill workers who were errant in their behavior, in the opinion of certain people in the community, and take them over to Ingersoll Hill, and frequently, if they were male, beat them or strip them and beat them, and sometimes subject them to other mistreatment, punishment, and then bring them back home. And one incident that I have uncovered here involved a couple of policemen who broke into a mill worker's house to punish him one night, dressed in Ku Klux Klan robes. One came in the back door and one came in the front door, only he had been forewarned. At that time he was quite a young man, and he killed both of them with a shotgun. And that case never came to trial in Columbus. The Ku Klux Klan was tied in very closely to discipline in the mills and also with the police department. The Columbus Police Department was for many years here the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan, and the meetings, the actual meetings of the Ku Klux Klan, was held in the police department. This is the little town, Columbus is the little town where Julian Harris, the son of Joel Chandler Harris, won a Pulitzer Prize in the 20s for his editorials against the Klan. And it has been a very active force in this community and in the mills throughout most of the 20th century. Not now. The Klan is not anywhere near as powerful as it used to be. But when I was a boy growing up here, it was a force to be reckoned with, not only in the society at large, but in politics and in getting jobs and keeping jobs. So the Klan is linked with the anti-labor movement in this town, the anti-union movement, and with the general textile world, larger textile world here.
Now, there seems to be a contradiction because in early September, Labor Day, there was a parade of all the unions, and at the end of the parade, there was a Ku Klux Klan demonstration at the end of the Labor Day parade. How does that, can you explain that?
Yes. The Klan was violently anti-union because the Klan, of course, was violently anti-black. And it's no coincidence that the head of the Ku Klux Klan here was the Reverend Johnson, who was head of the Ku Klux Klan and who published a newspaper here that was an anti-union and anti-black newspaper. Those two themes are closely linked in the history of this city. And really in the history of textile workers and unions throughout the South. So you frequently saw union people who would demonstrate separately from Ku Klux Klanners. Real union workers, AFL workers or other workers, didn't associate with the Klan and vice versa. And one of the hidden stories of violence here is the conflict between the union workers and organizers who must have been awfully brave men, and the Klan, which was very powerful. No, I'm fine. Just my head is hot.
We're rolling. Okay, Bill?
Behind me you'll see what's left of what used to be a large number of cotton warehouses in Columbus. In this particular incident, it's the W.C. Bradley warehouse, which is still used here by the W.C. Bradley Company. Old man W.C. Bradley came up to Columbus right before the Civil War from southwest Georgia and opened a warehousing and shipping company. Now, you can't see it from where you are there, but just behind me and to my left is the river, and that's where the riverboats came to get the cotton that Mr. W.C. would ship downriver to ports in Apalachicola, New Orleans, and elsewhere. W.C. Bradley was one of a small number of men, 4 or 5 men, who dominated the city's economic life through control of the textile industry and the cotton industry for more than a century here, well over a century. The mill owners included, in addition to men like W.C. Bradley, a large number of New Englanders, the Kyles and the Swifts and the Ilgeses and others, the Youngs, who came south either immediately before the war or shortly thereafter and made heavy investments in the mills in Columbus. These families are sometimes viewed as, locally particularly, as still controlling the town's economy and its social life. Columbus is one of those textile towns that was purely textiles for nearly a century and had no real competing industries. One of the reasons is that certainly the people who control the mills did not want competing industries in here because of the threat to raise the wage level. And there are many people in Columbus today, in fact I just did a survey of some 4,000 people, and one of the suspicions that people in Columbus still have is that well-paying industries are kept out of this city today by these same families and or agents of the textile industry. Interestingly enough, this town, Columbus, has the lowest manufacturing wage of any town in the state of Georgia, and that has been true for many years. It also is last in some 62 southeastern cities as far as job growth is concerned. So the depressed economic picture has been perpetuated in Columbus. And again, some people would say that it's a result of the attitude fostered initially by the people who owned and controlled the mills.
Perfect. Okay, Jamie, you just got
The Columbus Ledger-Enquirer, for which I work, has been in operation here in Columbus since really before the war. It was owned most of that time by a series of private individuals, and is now part of the Knight Ridder chain. And in a sense, its history parallels the history of the mills you see behind me in the background here, which have also been purchased recently in the 60s and 70s, really by large corporations, Fieldcrest, Cannon, etc. The mills had just as the mills had a anti-union stance throughout most of their history here, so has this newspaper, the Columbus Ledger-Enquirer. In fact, this has been a newspaper that is known throughout the South as having a very strong anti-union policy. During most of the strikes in Columbus and most of the violence here in the mills, starting in the 1880s and going really until the 1930s, the newspaper supported management, which is not surprising. The owners of the newspaper and the owners of the mills were friends. They socialized together. They were members of the country club here. They were members of the Big Eddie Club and are today. Their families spent a good deal of time together, and they were members of the same boards of directors of the bank, and frequently served on the boards of directors of their own companies. That is, the publisher would serve on the board of director of the bank or on the board of director of the cotton mill, and vice versa. So We had here in Columbus, just as in most southern textile towns, our big mules. That is our small group of businessmen who dominated the city's economic and social life. And the newspaper played its role in that, just like the other businesses, just like the mills.
I think we're going to try that again if you don't.
All right.
And make it much briefer
Okay.
and much more like Columbus was no different from other southern towns.
Okay, okay.
The mills and the newspapers were pretty much tied together.
Okay.
And then we can do our pan on the tied together,
Okay.
you see.
Oh,
And-
okay.
And then we can go on from there.
All right.
Still rolling.
Columbus was really no different from other textile towns in the South. The newspaper and the textile mills and the other major businesses in the city were tied together. They supported each other. The owners and management supported each other. The newspaper...
I'm sorry, man. The problem with the pan, as soon as he says...
I opened it with a pen. I started there and I went to him and then he starts his speech and I did it at the end of the
We're rolling.
The newspaper here, the Columbus Ledger-Enquirer, is really no different from other newspapers in the South, and in its relationship to the textile mills and to other businesses. They were mutually supporting. For most of its history, the Columbus Ledger-Enquirer has had a very pro-management, very anti-labor union stance. In the 1940s, a movement to unionize the paper was broken by management here. During the 1934 strikes and the earlier strikes, the newspaper was a very strong and very vocal supporter of the management, textile mills management in the city, which it remains today, by the way. It's still very anti-union.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was waiting for the line
know.
of... We're rolling again.
Columbus is no different from other towns. The newspaper and the mills work together. The management of one supports the management of the other. Both are very anti-union and very much pro-management.
Fine, that's it. Then we can go on, come back to you, and all of that. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, we can come back to
I don't hear nothing. Jamie, you want me to call Rod Serling?
Let me see, get my reflection. Take a step back. Buff right there. I've had it. I can't take it anymore. I'm going nuts.